Joining us with reaction to the open Supreme Court vacancy, President Trump's judicial nominations advisors, Leonard Leo, and joining us by phone is President Trump's attorney, Jay Sekulow, who, by the way, does legal work for me, and, by the way, do you basically represent everybody? Full disclosure, and I had dinner once with Jay, and I paid. All right, let's start with your reaction to this. This is history. This is generations. This is an opportunity now. This is a big deal. And let's go through the philosophy of the president in making this decision.
Well, look, I think I've litigated Supreme Court cases in front of Anthony Hannity for 3 decades. So, and about 80% of the time he ruled in our favor. About 20% of the time he did not. He was always a professional, but the fact is that when I disagree with him or he disagreed with me, which he had the right to do, he's the justice of the court. His vote counted a lot more than mine. But at the end of the day, I would say more times than not he went with us. But there was not a consistent, what we would call a conservative philosophy in the mold of, say, now Justice Gorsuch or Antonin Scalia, Justice Alito, Justice Thomas. And the president now has an opportunity to nominate a justice in that judicial philosophy that the president talked about and continues to talk about, and that is putting someone on the court that has that, what I would call an originalist Supreme Court philosophy or constitutional philosophy, a constitutional conservative. You could call it a lot of different phrases, but the fact is someone that views the Constitution by the words that are written in it. You amend the Constitution through an amendment process, not through judicial fiat, and I think that's what you'll see in a Supreme Court nominee.
Yeah, and Leonard Leo, I think what Jay said is right on the money. Kennedy did not have a consistent judicial philosophy, which made him the swing vote. I mean, you have 4 reliable liberal justices on the court right now. And I mean, we know how they're going to vote. In 9 out of 10, 99% of cases. This is important because there's been at least 25 times that Anthony Kennedy has sided with the 4 liberal justices on the court. This is a game changer.
What's transformative about this is that the president's committed to nominating people to the court who have a very firm judicial philosophy. You know, people who understand that the Constitution needs to be interpreted the way the framers meant it to be. Individuals who are courageous in that interpretive approach and are not going to flinch. We saw that in Neil Gorsuch, and I think if the president nominates another individual like Neil Gorsuch, what we're going to see is widespread public support. And I would say also probably bipartisan support in the Senate to some extent, as we did with Justice Gorsuch.
Leonard Leo, you may be more optimistic than me. I just look at the Democratic Party today, and I think basically unless you're a saint and you've never written on the law at all, if you have any judicial philosophy, we know what they want to do, and that's bork somebody. I want to go a little bit deeper, Jay, into the idea. This is important for people to understand. The president does not believe in judicial activism. He believes in separation of powers. He believes in co-equal branches of government. He doesn't believe in citing foreign law. They believe in the Constitution. He believes that justices should not legislate for the bench. That's for the legislative body to do.
Well, that's right. And here's you mentioned the foreign law application. I litigate in courts in other countries. I've litigated cases in the European Court of Human Rights. And when our court, when the Supreme Court of the United States were to cite, and they do from time to time cite cases from the European Court of Human Rights, recognizing that many of these governments that are part of the ECHR, as it's called, do not even have constitutions, let alone our Constitution. So I think this whole trend that you've seen develop over the last 40 years. And, Sean, this goes way back. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, but this goes way back. The idea that, and I think this is where Leonard's absolutely correct, I'm actually optimistic that if we see, and I am convinced we will, see a nominee in the caliber of Neil Gorsuch, that individual will get bipartisan support. That's because at the end of the day, the reality is that the president is the one that nominates. It's with the advice and consent of the Senate, but the president gets to make the nomination.
But last word, we'll give it to you, Leonard Leo, tonight.
I'm very confident the president's going to nominate an extraordinary individual. It'll be a big fight, Sean, as you point out, but the American people stand with us in appointing judges.
Is Brett Kavanaugh a front runner?
I think it's somebody who's being very seriously considered, absolutely.
Thank you both.